focus to other news. Iran is all set to hold the next round of nuclear negotiations with the United States in Rome on Saturday. The talks with the U.S. will once again be mediated by Oman. The Sultanate has hosted 2 rounds of talks so far, one in Oman's capital Muscat and 1 round at its embassy in Rome. Meanwhile, right ahead of the talks, Iran is reportedly going to have a meeting with the E3, the diplomatic grouping of France, Germany and the United Kingdom, to discuss the nuclear deal. While speaking on the meeting with E3, here's what Arakchi said.
سه کشور اروپایی به نظر من به خاطر سیاست‌های غلطی که اتخاذ کردن در حال حاضر نقششون کم رنگ‌تر شده. ما البته مایل به این قضیه نیستیم، برای همین هم دور بعدی مذاکرات رو آمادگی داریم و اونها در روم برگزار بکنیم. 4 دور تا الان برگزار شده. ما علاقمند هستیم که این موضوع در یک فهم بین‌المللی با یک درک جهانی نسبت بهش حل و فصل بشه و به مذاکرات خودمون ادامه میدیم با اروپایی ها، ولی مذاکرات اصلی در حال حاضر با آمریکا.
Joining me on the broadcast is Mr. Daniel Roth, Research Director, United Against Nuclear Iran. Mr. Roth, thank you for speaking to NewsX World. I, of course, want to begin by asking you, what are your first thoughts on how far the talks with Iran have come?
Yes, so on Saturday, this will be the 4th round of talks. The details have been kept quite close, actually. There's been little leaking, so a lot of what analysts are saying is very much speculative. But the signals, the messaging seems to be that progress is being made. I remain skeptical about the final details of a deal, however, because as often we see, during the Biden administration over the past 4 years, when America reached out to Iran many times, Iran always tries to get that one extra concession, and that often leads to a breakdown of the deal. So really, I think there's going to be several more rounds before anything really emerges. But so far, the signs are that things are progressing. As to the contours of a deal, well, we can discuss that, I suppose.
Absolutely. Mr. Roth, I also want to understand from you, what role do you think the E3 will be playing as far as the conversations are concerned?
Not much. The French ambassador to the UN, I noted last night, was saying that he was actually asked this kind of question, and he said, well, although we are part of the JCPOA, which involved France, the UK and Germany, we are happy that these are bilateral relations between the US and Iran, and they exclude the EU. So, from the EU are saying and France are saying, we are happy to be on the side. The thing that is of consequence in terms of the EU is the fact that they could reimpose these UN sanctions on Iran in October, and that's to do with the original Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. So there's this kind of time crunch. This is in October, this expires. So that is the dimension that is important from the European side.
And Mr. Roth, how do you think the US will go about these negotiations at this point in time, given that it's already engaged in a minerals deal that it has cracked with Ukraine, which possibly opens up some sort of a further conversation with the Russian side as well over the war, and also the tariff agreements that America has to now formalize with countries across the world?
Yes, the Russian dimension is going to be significant, I think, if a deal gets done. As we saw last time, Iranian material could be exported to Russian territory. Russia also was helping with civilian nuclear, with Iran's civilian nuclear program. But before we get to that, I have been seeing, contradictory messages. The US envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, just last night appeared to adopt a much tougher line, and he was talking about that The big flaw of the last deal was that it expired. So that's, what the Americans refer to as the sunsets. He's now saying that sunsets cannot be a part of this deal, i.e. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. And when he says never, that means for the life of this deal, which has to be forever. So that was a good sign. And he was also talking about the enrichment principle. Previously, he's talked about going to 3.67%, which would be the same as the JCPOA deal. Now he's talking about how enrichment was the fatal flaw, another fatal flaw of that previous deal. He mentioned about the weaponization problem. And as I said, he mentioned about those expiries. So as I said at the start, it's very difficult to really pass exactly what's going on in negotiations themselves. But I think the latest is, from my perspective, from my organization's perspective, these are good signals, and I truly hope that they will be followed through in any final deal if a deal does happen.
And Mr. Roth, lastly, I want to, of course, understand from you, how crucial will a decision on the Houthis be as far as a deal between Washington and Tehran is concerned?
Well, that's a very timely question. Close Iran watchers would have seen the US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth issue a very strong tweet last night, and it was a message to Iran, to the regime in Tehran. He said, we see your lethal in all caps support to the Houthis. We know what you're doing. You also know what the US military is capable of. So that's interesting that they are, the US is issuing this direct threat to Iran due to its obvious and significant support to the Houthis, including provision of drones, which are, attacking US naval carriers, military, and also US commercial shipping. So yeah, that is an interesting dimension of the contours of any particular deal. Let's hope the Iranians are listening.
All right. Mr. Daniel Roth, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX World with that perspective. Viewers, that's all that we have time